Hello, everyone, and welcome back to episode 104. I hope that you've all had a wonderful week once again. Thank you so much for the reviews that you've left me this week. You've left me a couple of new ones, and I've absolutely loved reading them. They mean the world to me, so please keep them coming. So it's Monday. I'm sat here recording on my bed with the cat and just feeling a very deep sense of gratitude for my life right now because I'm not at work. The sun is shining. I have complete freedom to spend my time how I want. I'm doing work that I love. I'm working in alignment with my purpose. And I've also had some really great conversations this week and this morning, actually. I've had loads of synchronicities that are just flying in every direction and in every form. And yesterday I had a really beautiful day, the best day I've had for a long time. And I didn't do anything particularly excited. I just had a day where I felt very, very connected to Source. And I spent the day just sitting on my windowsill, journaling and reading and drinking a bottle of 0% Prosecco, non-alcoholic Prosecco, check me out, from Aldi, well nice by the way, and just soaking in the sun, visualising what it will be like when I live in my dream home with the balcony. So I just shoved my ass on the windowsill and made it as close as possible in the 3D, and I posted about that on my Instagram. So, and I just went out for a walk later on. I walked up to the shops down Horwich and I had a really, really nice day. And I'd been having a lot of these synchronicities happening all day, which is what happens when, well, it's what happens normally, but it's particularly on those days where I connect to Source and like be present and do things like journaling and meditation and all of those things. So later in the day, I had a really obvious one that just proves how we are constantly creating our 3D experience with our thoughts, and I thought I will share that with you. So whenever I have a day where I really tap into that side, they come in so obviously and so quickly. So I just want to tell you about this one because it actually like made me laugh out loud because it was just so obvious. At weekend, I had been out to the pub with these two lads that I know. I've known them since school. And one of them, last time we went out, had mentioned that he'd recently bumped into this other lad that we all went to school with and that we knew. He wasn't necessarily like somebody we were all friends with, but he was just a lad who was in our year at school. And he'd stopped and asked this lad how he was doing and what he'd been up to. And this lad responded by saying something that would, like, make you pull your face if I were to say it, especially if you're a woman. I won't say what he said, but in more disrespectful words than this, he suggested that he was having great success with women. And this lad, from what I remember anyway, was not the Casanova type. So it just made me laugh a little bit and cringe a little bit that he would say that sort of thing, because it just seemed a bit of an inappropriate overshirt. Anyway, what he said was beside the point. It was just something that my friend had told me about in passing. And then yesterday, while I was walking to the shop, it just came into my head again what he told me, and I kind of imagined him saying that, and I sort of like laughed a little bit and cringed about it. And I just literally thought of it for about 10 seconds and that was it. And I haven't seen this lad that he was talking about since I was 16, like when we were at school. And I shit you not, as I looked up, just after having that thought, he was there, stood outside this bar on the other side of the street from the shop that I was going in, looking right at me. And I haven't seen this lad for like 20 years nearly. And honestly, my jaw dropped because it was just an instant manifestation. I literally thought about him and he just appeared like that, and it was so instant that it made me start laughing. And then I had to run into the shop because I didn't want him to be offended and think that I was laughing at him, because I wasn't. I was just laughing at how amazing manifestation is, especially on the days where you can tell that you are really tapped into Source and to the 5D. So that was just a little quick story I wanted to share with you, because I like to share my manifestations in whatever form they come in and give you a bit of inspiration. But if you experience a lot of things that seem like coincidence, just know that they're not coincidences. There's no such thing as coincidence. You're creating everything. And when you see all these signs, you give them meaning, but they are coming from your consciousness. You're creating them in the 5D, in your higher self, in source, whatever you want to call it. So this week, I am just going to speak on what I am being called to speak about, which is slightly different than normal. I'm going a bit rogue, and whatever comes out is just flowing through me from somewhere higher, and I trust that it will be what somebody needs to hear in the moment. So I will ask you to listen through this podcast without any judgments that you might already have when you hear certain words that I'll say, and they might make you want to switch off or form an opinion really quickly. I'm just going to ask you to keep an open mind and form an opinion at the end that's yours. So this morning I had a message off another old friend of mine who was asking me if I knew anything about something called DMT, or dimethyltryptamine, or tryptamine, I think it might be, dimethyltryptamine. And we were talking about psychedelics in general. Now, this is not a topic that I could have ever commented on in the past due to the nature of my job. But now I have got more freedom to talk about anything, I will. But I'm going to caveat this by saying I am not a doctor or an expert. What I'm saying is just my opinion, and I am in no way actively encouraging or advising anyone to do this. So please don't sue me. I'm just talking about it. And this is also not an episode on psychedelics as such. This is just a little part of it before I talk about some other things. So my friend had sent me this video of a comedian called Paul Smith who was relaying his own experience of trying DMT. And it's brilliant. It's really funny. If you've not watched it, it's on YouTube. But we were talking about how many people have this same experience of a certain being appearing to them when they take DMT. And I find that incredibly interesting because almost everybody that tries DMT reports having very similar experiences. And I also find it interesting that we are conditioned to believe that these things are bad or dangerous or scary, when there is a huge amount of research by psychologists and neuroscientists to suggest that these kind of plant medicines are the solution, or could be the solution, to many of the common conditions that cause humans to suffer endlessly. So common conditions that appear to have no cure in modern medicine, like PTSD and anxiety and depression, and even things like the less desirable symptoms of neurodivergences like ADHD and autism. There is evidence to say that these sorts of things could potentially be a solution to the suffering of humans who are having those kinds of experiences. Now, again, I'm not an expert, and I'm sure that there'll be evidence on both sides. And you might already feel like, no, I don't believe that. I think it's really bad. I'm just asking you to keep an open mind for the rest of this episode. So at the risk of sounding like a conspiracy theorist, I'm well aware that I'm David Icke right now. Just stick with me for a second while I share my opinion that might be a bit controversial. So if you have listened to me for this long, I think that you'll be open-minded enough to hear it. And if you've just randomly found me today, buckle up, babe, while we talk about these very controversial subjects. Now, I personally find it a bit of a red flag that we will happily take anything that we're prescribed from a doctor, even though these drugs that we take very commonly and they're totally socially acceptable often have quite significant side effects that are almost as bad as what we're trying to treat, but maybe in a different way. So I think that modern medicine is an absolute fucking marvel. I think it's incredible that we have people who are creating things to treat conditions that once would have killed us. Like, people used to die of things that are just very normal and routine now that people don't worry about. Absolutely amazing. We would be truly lost without things like antibiotics and painkillers and anaesthetic to be able to perform surgeries that save people's lives. So I want to be clear that I am not in any way slating it. Medicine, modern medicine, has literally saved my dad's life, for one. He was given something called immunotherapy. But I believe that it saved his life because he used it alongside other holistic healing methods too, like meditation, which I'm going to talk about soon. And also because some of the new medicines that are on the market now, like immunotherapy, work in totally different ways. They actually use the body's own immune system, so they're utilising what we already have to heal ourselves. So the medications are acting like a booster of what we already have, which I love. I think that's a really significant development in medicine. But going back to what I was saying, modern medicine is absolutely incredible. When you've got something immediate that needs addressing, like an infection or a health condition with immediate consequences, or even things like a severe bout of very poor mental health, if somebody's really struggling with a certain mental health condition, give me the drugs. I'm going to take them, believe me. When I was passing out in pain at the doctor's about a year ago from the pain of an infection that I had, you had better believe that I was banging on the doctor's door and I was knocking back a cocktail of prescribed drugs without even looking at the box or giving a shit about the side effects. I wanted a doctor to help me, and I wanted some antibiotics and some painkillers that were made in a laboratory by scientists. What I didn't want was a shamanic healer and a dot leaf in that point. But when it comes to things called like chronic conditions, you know, like the ones that have no cure, and the diseases and the ongoing battles with mental health, and things like persistent migraines and autoimmune disorders like eczema and celiac disease and the million other ones that are out there, I think there's a lot of value in being open to the idea of addressing those issues using modern medicine and also holistic medicine, which could take the form of things like plant medicine, or it could be things like meditation, Reiki, any number of sort of medicine or ways of healing, methods of healing that are not accepted by modern medicine, you know, like doctors and things. I'm not saying every single doctor, but, you know, the ones that sort of are viewed to be a little bit more out there. I think a combination of the amazing things that we've created through modern medicine alongside methods that have been used by people for hundreds of thousands of years is the key to regaining our health in whatever area it is. The undeniable thing about most medication that's prescribed long term, and again, I don't mean things like antibiotics or painkillers or things that are used, well, maybe painkillers actually, but things that are used as a short-term solution, I don't mean those. I mean the ones that are prescribed forever, you know, the ones that you're on for the rest of your life. Things like antidepressants long-term, anti-anxiety medication long-term, statins long-term, blood pressure pills long-term. All those things are putting a plaster on the wound but never actually healing it. And I think that we can all agree on that, whether you agree that it's a good idea or not. And I would never discourage somebody from like not taking the medication. I would just say, look at other solutions to fix it long-term rather than just relying on it. Because that is what you're doing. You're relying on using these man-made solutions continuously forever, and there's no way of coming off them usually. And I'll use my own experience so that I'm not speaking for anybody else. But today I have taken my ADHD medication, and I didn't really want to. I don't really like taking it, but I've come to the conclusion that I will use it as a temporary solution for when the less desirable effects of the gift that is ADHD, and I really do feel like it's a gift in general, are slapping my ass and are preventing me from doing what I need to do. So, for example, I'm in the middle of writing the membership and I'm struggling with extreme procrastination where everything feels overwhelming. So this week I'm going to take them because I know that they're going to help me to get done the actual physical part of creating something that I need to bring to life, because I know it's going to benefit so many people. So I now view them as a tool that I can use, and I'm finding a balance between using both modern medicine and holistic methods to get the most out of the way that my particular brain works. And I'm sure you can guess which methods I lean towards. It's the holistic ones, but I'm not against using medication as well, is what I'm trying to say. What I won't do is take my medication as it's prescribed, which is daily, without any breaks. And the reason for that is very simple. It's that, for one, it blocks my creativity. It helps me get my creativity into a packaged format that I can present to all of you guys, but it blocks my actual creativity. And secondly, I don't want to take 60 milligrams of amphetamines every single day, personally, just to be productive, because that cost of the daily productivity is just too high for me. And I'm grateful that the medication is there when I need it. People notice when I'm on them. You'll probably notice now, maybe I come across a little bit differently. People say that I speak a bit differently. They'll comment on how organised I am, or how well I function, or how tidy my house is and how much I get done. Basically, how much I fit into what's expected of us, like from society. And at those times, I often excel with certain areas. But what they don't see is that I also stay awake, as in like wide awake for over 48 hours sometimes, which is damaging. I often won't eat anything for days on end. Damaging. I'm dehydrated. I get Raynaud's on my hands and fingers, which is where you temporarily lose sensation and like feeling and colour from your fingers and toes. I get headaches. I feel jittery. I talk at 100 miles an hour. I'm physically shaky. My heart races. And the worst of all is that if I continue to take them for days on end, I get crippling kidney pain in the night, which is because of how harsh a chemical I'm ingesting every single day. So it's just not worth it for me to take them all the time. So I use them as a tool alongside many other, in my opinion, less damaging tools that I have in my toolkit. And I do not judge anybody for having their own opinion or their own ways of managing whatever it is that affects them personally. Mine changed over time. There was a time where I took them every day and I thought they were amazing. There's been other times where I've never taken them for months, almost a year. And now I take them as and when. There's no right or wrong. I'm just saying that these things that I think to prompt you to think about your own opinions of what you've been told and to question what you're told. So anyway, right, back. 17 minutes. See, there you go. I feel like I've been talking for about 3 minutes and 17 minutes has passed by, which is another side effect of this medication. So anyway, if you haven't heard about DMT before, which I'll just tell you a little bit more about, I'll say that it's not something that I have ever had. And that is because, like many, up until recently, I have always felt and believed that psychedelics are something that I should be afraid of, something to fear. But I've come to realise that that's not true, because they're just exposing you to another level of consciousness, in my opinion. So, FYI, DMT, in my area at least, is illegal, and in most circumstances, very suspicious if you ask me, but it's illegal in most places. But there are apparently exceptions for certain religious groups, and there are many places in the world where apparently it's encouraged and not illegal at all, and that's particularly within groups who are like Indigenous people who know a lot about healing the body and expanded levels of consciousness and things like that. And they've known about that for hundreds and thousands of years. It's been passed down. That's where we, as the Western world, have learned about things like this, because that wisdom has been passed over to us. So, interestingly, those groups of people who have always traditionally used things like plant medicine and holistic healing tend to suffer with far less medical issues that commonly affect the rest of the world, particularly the Western world, where we are conditioned to believe that medicine, as in modern medicine, as in pharmaceuticals and drugs that are created by billion-dollar companies, are the only solution, which is very interesting, I think. So anyway, DMT is a chemical that our body naturally produces, and it's also found in certain plants like ayahuasca, and it causes what we are told are hallucinations, but what most people who have done it or who regularly take psychedelics believe is another level of consciousness. It's allowing you to tap into a different dimension of reality and access that spirit or that source aspect of you that most people are not accessing regularly. And the really interesting thing is that it's actually released naturally in the body, and the point at which it's released is usually just before death. And people who have had near-death experiences often report the feeling of absolute euphoria, of overwhelming love, of complete peace, and visions of a world that is separate from the physical one that we know. They tend to come back from that near-death experience with a completely different view of reality and a complete lack of death, because they've had a little preview of what's coming on the other side, and that's said to be from the production of the DMT in the body. So some other popular psychedelics that might be slightly less intense of an experience are things like mushrooms. And again, disclaimer, please don't start eating toadstools in the woods because you will probably poison yourself and die. But mushrooms are becoming more and more popular with people, more accepted as a way to manage or heal certain conditions, particularly around mental health complaints or even things like neurodiversity. And I am a big, big believer that using these tools wisely rather than abusively could have massive benefits for us as humans. So that's what I'll say about that. That's my personal opinion. Thank you for coming to my TED Talks on psychedelics. And I completely understand that everybody has different opinions on topics like that. And we've all got our own belief systems about, I'm going to do air quotes, drugs. So my definition of drugs is not based on whether something is legal or not, because that changes depending on the area in the country that you live in. I personally view drugs as man-made substances that include things like prescribed medication, as well as other things that are available on other markets. Now, I don't necessarily view them as good or bad. I just see them as sometimes they're necessary. But when it comes to natural substances that our body produce and we can find in nature, like DMT and mushrooms and cannabis and ayahuasca, I view those more like some kind of gift from the earth that can do a lot of good when they're respected as they deserve to be respected and used as a medicine and as a tool for accessing new states of consciousness with good intention, and could potentially also do a lot of damage if they're being used like a crutch or abused, which is the same way I feel about prescription medication. I feel they can also do a lot of harm. So again, I'm going to reiterate, I don't say this to convince you of anything, just to literally spark you to think about what your own opinions are rather than adopting the opinions of the masses, the ones that you've been given by others. You certainly do not have to agree with me, and I would always encourage you to have your own opinions. And of course, if psychedelics or plant medicine or anything that I've talked about is something that you are thinking about trying, please do it safely. There's lots of people who are very experienced in serving plant medicine as a tool for consciousness and who will do it in the right environment for the purposes of healing with that intention and, do it in a safe place, not just for recreation or, need, like using it abusively. So if it was, which I'm not suggesting that you do, that's the route to take. Now, there are also other ways to access altered states of consciousness from within, the main one being meditation. And I know that I have mentioned meditation a million times, but I haven't really talked about it for a while. So if you have been listening from the start of this podcast, you'll know my experience with it. A few years ago, I was suffering from crippling anxiety. And although I have talked about it before, I don't think I've ever actually described exactly what that was like for me in my experience. So I'm going to do that today because it fits in with what I'm talking about. So anxiety for me took several forms. It wasn't that I couldn't talk to people. You would never have known that I had anxiety. I wasn't afraid of leaving the house, anything like that. In fact, it really didn't affect me that much in the daytime, weirdly. Apart from that, I could not relax my muscles, like my shoulders were touching my ears all the time. It was like the muscle memory in my body that allowed me to relax in the past was just gone. So I lived totally tensed up in my body all the time, including when I was asleep. So as you can imagine, I had like constant muscle ache and headaches and things like that. But other than that, you wouldn't have known. What would happen though was that I would have these episodes of like hysteria, I suppose, where I would sometimes find myself, I remember one time in particular, where I found myself laughing so hysterically that I could not speak for well over 20 minutes. And it looked very entertaining on the outside. It just looked like I was having a great time. But on the inside, I was completely terrified. I remember it clearly. I was like crying on the inside because I just didn't know why I was laughing and I had no control over it. I didn't know when it was going to end. I didn't know why I was doing it. It was just like the feeling of really, really losing your marbles. That's the closest I've ever felt to that. And I also had health anxiety, which is where you convince yourself that you are dying or critically ill all the time from a variety of bizarre and rare medical conditions. And even though you know rationally it makes no sense and that you're absolutely fine, you can't be convinced by your own logic because you can actually physically feel the symptoms of whatever it is that you convince yourself you have. You manifest them in your physical. And this would happen to me all the time. And I would also think that there was something wrong with my partner at the time. And I remember like, oh my God, it's not funny, but like, it's just crazy to think what I used to do. He would be asleep in bed and I would be rolling glasses on him, like rolling a glass on him because I was convinced that he had meningitis and like ringing 111 secretly in the middle of the night to ask for advice on all these different medical conditions. It was absolutely ridiculous. And I also experienced like paranoia where I would stand at the window through the night, multiple times a night, sometimes for up to an hour, convinced that there was somebody trying to break into my house or my neighbour's house again and again and again. I'd be waking him up and he'd have to go downstairs and walk around the house and the garden with a bat, knowing full well that there was nobody there because there was nobody there last night and nobody there the night before. And I know I've not spoken of him highly in my recent episode, but credit where it's due, he was incredibly patient with me at that point in my life. And I'm very, very grateful to him for being there through that point because I understand now that I must have been exhausting to live with at that point, and I really would have been lost without him. So shout out there. I've done things like call the police on several occasions because I would see figures that weren't there. And one night it got so bad that I convinced myself that somebody had hung a cat from a tree by its neck. And I went out in like a little vest and shorts in the middle of December and almost crawled up the hill that I lived on, slipping all over this thick ice at about 3 o'clock in the morning to get the cat, and it just wasn't there. Like I got there was no cat, there was nothing there. It was a complete hallucination. So I would be completely paranoid that these things were going on outside all the time. But the worst part for me, which is what I've spoken about in the past, is horrific panic attacks that I would have several times a night, sometimes 2, sometimes 6, and it would leave me feeling like I was drowning because my body would actually forget how to breathe. It was like the automatic function of breathing that totally escaped me. Like I would just be running around desperately in the house trying to like catch my breath, trying to remember how to breathe, like I was choking or like I was underwater every night. So I was scared to go to bed all the time because this exhausting cycle would begin again and again and again. And that was by far the worst time of my life. I would say that it went on for probably around about 6 months. And it's only now, in hindsight, having reached a state of complete peace and where I never do anything like that, it just doesn't even occur to me to feel like I'm threatened in any way or that there's anything dangerous around me. I can see now just how mentally unwell I was, and I really didn't understand that at the time. And the reason that I'm telling you that today is because I made a full and quick recovery from all of this shit, and the recovery was through nothing but meditation. And I could have been on a whole host of medication from the doctors for all the different things I was going through, but I chose meditation. And within a week of meditating constantly with absolutely no prior experience at all, I never had another panic attack, and the other symptoms resolved very, very quickly, and I returned to just feeling like I had a life again. And for anyone who has not suffered with something like that, that might not sound like a big deal to you, but for the thousands of you listening that have, you will understand how debilitating living like that is, and how incredible it is that it still amazes me to this day that just through meditation you can quickly and fully recover from such severe torment and misery and end up living in complete peace. And not only that, but expand your consciousness on top of that. Now, because it changed my life for the better in such dramatic ways, meditation became a huge part of my life, and it's always the thing that I will harp on about to anybody who's struggling with anything, because it just had a massive impact on me. So I practiced meditation from that point daily for a long time, and I started with short meditations and I ended up doing longer and longer meditations, and I couldn't get enough of it. And by developing that practice, I was then able to not only heal from what had troubled me before, but I was actually able to go deeper and deeper into these altered states of consciousness, which is what I'm talking about today. So not only did it help me recover from those worst days of my life, but it gifted me with this ability to access this aspect of me that I had no idea it even existed before then. And that led me, among other things, to have this spiritual awakening. And I would love nothing more than for you to experience that too. And the term spiritual awakening has got a lot of sort of negative associations with like wearing tie-dye and having to live off the fat of the land. And it's just not that. Sometimes that is a part of the process that you go through, because you realise that your happiness is on the inside, it's not on anything external. So you definitely could have that period of time. But let me be clear when I say that even on the other side, I and everyone else who has gone through it is very, very, very much still an imperfect human. So when I say spiritual awakening, don't be put off by that term. I'm talking about becoming consciously aware of the true nature of reality and just snapping out of the shackles that you've been chained to, so that you can realise your true power as a human being with this spiritual power that is within you, and, you know, the true power of everybody who's in the world. So how do I word this without saying too much? I've had a good time over the years. Let's say I've thoroughly enjoyed my partying days, and I have dived headfirst into the variety of experiences that came with those party days. I have lived a life rich in experiences, if you're picking up what I'm putting down. But there is nothing external in my experience that has given me the deep moments of connection to source and the trippy experiences and absolutely euphoric highs that I have had purely through nothing but meditation. So even if you have no interest in ever experimenting with any of the things that I've spoken about today, which is absolutely fine, just know that you don't actually need to, because you already have the capacity to access all of that and more. When we're meditating, we're tapping out of our physical senses. So we're moving away from our body and stepping into our consciousness. And that state won't come straight away. Like anything, it takes regular practice for you to get there. Don't think that you're meditating wrong because you don't experience this kind of magical sensation. You just need to keep going. You just need to train your mind to be okay with gradually going deeper and deeper and deeper. And when you get to that point, you'll know. I can tell you right now, you'll know. And if at that point you consistently practice, you'll be able to get into that state again quickly. So just like if you started running, you wouldn't be able to run 10k for quite a while. You'd have to train up to that point. When you hit 10k, the chances are that you'd be able to do 10k over and over and over again. You wouldn't need to retrain. But if you stopped running, then, you know, that will fall off a little bit and you'll have to retrain it. It's exactly the same thing with meditation. At the minute, I am retraining myself because I have not consistently meditated for a while. I still meditate fairly often, but because I am now healed by it, of the things that I started it for in the first place, I don't need to meditate every day like I used to. But now I just want to, because by doing that, I get this really deep connection to source. It's not to do with me healing anything more. It's to do with me connecting. So I feel like this episode is very much me talking about myself. I apologise if it comes out like that. You've been with me for 35 minutes and I shit you not, I feel like I've been recording for about 2 minutes. But I hope that you'll understand that this topic requires me to kind of share my own experience to encourage you to have your own experiences, because they're all completely unique. I don't often talk about spirituality much on the podcast, and that's for a reason. It's because I feel that it puts people off. They think it's a bit woo-woo and it's a bit weird. And I know that my purpose is most definitely to teach about the power of the mind and how to become a conscious creator, which can be taught completely separately. It's not really separate, but it can be taught separate. I am not a spiritual teacher, and I've got a lot more to learn about it, and I'm really only at the very start of that journey. But I feel I would be doing you a disservice if I wasn't occasionally encouraging you to at least explore that aspect of yourself, because it's incredible. Like, the benefits of it are amazing, and it's actually the main aspect of you, whether you know that right now or not. You are a spiritual being having a human experience. You're not a human having a spiritual experience at all. That might be what it feels like, but it's the opposite way around. So if you have been holding that idea that you have got to be like a hippie to be spiritual, please release that now. You are spiritual right now as you are, in any form. And if you want to, and you choose to expand your awareness of that, there are absolutely no requirements for you to be devoid of material desires and follow some sort of high and mighty guru. And anybody who is telling you that you need to do that, or you need to live in a specific way or present yourself in a specific way to be spiritual, and I'm doing air quotes because of course you're spiritual, is talking shit. So don't listen to them. You don't have to be perfect to be spiritual. So by meditating and tapping out of your 3D body and going into that deep meditative space, you're accessing the infinite field of source energy and this unlimited potential where you can create in the 5D. Absolutely everything in regards to manifestation and everything that you know about it so far will be miles easier when you tap into that, because you'll be tuned into your intuition. You'll be able to allow your emotions to flow with less resistance. You'll be able to self-regulate when you're in times of stress in the physical world. You'll be able to receive messages from your higher self or spirit guides or angels or your God or whatever word resonates with you. You'll see signs and synchronicities that will guide you. You'll clearly see how your subconscious beliefs are being reflected back to you in the 3D, and you will experience a sense of safety and peace like you have never had before. I can promise you that. So all I'm asking you to do is to just be curious, do a little bit of research, try a few of the tools available. Just be open-minded where you might normally have been closed, and question what you've been told in the past, because some of the things that I've said today might have kind of got you back up a little bit or made you think, no, I don't agree with that, or I didn't know that about her. And what you'll see is that when you're open-minded and when you really think about these things and you do a little bit of research, you'll find that not all of your opinions and beliefs about these things are actually yours. The beliefs that you have held for a long time that have come from the society that you live in, or maybe that have come from people that you looked up to when you were young, when you were still forming your identity that you currently hold, and they've been given to you. And if they don't work for you anymore, you've got the power to release them and form new beliefs. You have that power. You don't have to. You can keep them if you like, no problem. But you don't have to believe what you are told by the masses. It's okay. You can have your own opinion. So, Jesus Christ, 39 minutes. So I hope that you've enjoyed this week's podcast, which is very long. I do apologise. And if you have, I would be so grateful if you could leave me a review. Or you can come and join us in the Facebook group, Empower State Community, or you can tag me in your stories on Instagram at Empower State. and get in touch and let me know what you think, because I'm very interested to hear. So have a wonderful week. Go and tap into that 5D, try a little meditation, and I will speak to you next week. I'll see you later.